thank you, Shoman. Thanks to all the panelists, really, for excellent presentations, very deep and very thoughtful. Now we have about 20 minutes or so, maybe just under, for panel discussion. Professor Nakacinovic is going to kick us off with a few remarks. I'd encourage the audience here and possibly online, if it's possible, to be thinking about some questions, and then we can direct these to the speakers here after Naki's remarks. Again, Naki is formerly from IASA and the Technical University of Vienna. Still IASA. Okay, go ahead, Naki.
Thank you. I will sit here in order to save some time, and also because I have to go to another session in 10 minutes. Let me just, first of all, congratulate all of the speakers and the whole EDITS community, I think, on really, really important work. And you don't hear it? Yeah. I think that the microphone is on. Maybe I do it.
It's on, right here.
Okay. Really important work. As some of the speakers have mentioned, it is one of the few strategies that we have to avoid net negative emissions in the future, and we don't know how that's going to work. So I think the end-use change, improving the energy services is really central to the evolution of the energy system. Now, I worked on energy already 50 years ago, believe it or not, during the so-called energy problem, and it was clear to us at that time as well that the energy end use is the key, but we didn't really have the means. So I'm really, really happy that the community now is working on that. So it's a huge step forward. So let me just make, in interest of time, 3 comments. Number one, many of the speakers have talked about the importance of the digital revolution. And I fully agree with that. But I think we also need to have a holistic approach to better capture both the positive and the negative dimensions of that. So digital revolution is a huge, I think, a huge enabler of many of the things we talked about, shared economy, reduction of material, and so on. But at the same time, it poses some danger. So it would be good to include that much more explicitly in our work, because without, I think, the digital technologies, this will not happen. And just go to the example that Keivan mentioned on the mobile phones. In addition, that they're 100 times more efficient than the devices they replace, we shouldn't forget that they've used only within 30 years. And it's an incredibly inclusive technology because everybody in the world has a phone. It's a great achievement. And I hope that with the other end-use technologies, we will have the same thing. By the way, even the people, about over 1 billion people who do not have access to energy or cannot afford energy have a mobile phone. That's how important that is. So I think we need to work in that direction. Another comment, the second one, is I think that the title of this session was really well chosen, but not necessarily the low demand notion itself. Because this is not about the no demand, and I think that the title is good. It is about more services, it's about more equitable services, more just services. So it is about the efficiency, in my view, at the end of the day, the purpose of the energy system is to provide the energy services. So we need to focus on that. It is about the energy services that are more efficient, but I would also argue more sufficient, that we don't have the overconsumption. Despite the efficiency, that's also important. So we need the both to have an equitable world. And in the last 30 or so seconds, let me just comment on, I think, the storyline. I think there is a great storyline, the great narrative about the future evolving here, but I think the community has to work much more on it. I think the storyline needs to be in some ways really attractive, highlighting the co-benefits that you worked on, David, highlighting the co-benefits and why we should do this, and climate is clearly an important, but human development is at least as important, if not more. So a little bit more about that. So I think the work on what needs to be done is brilliant from my point of view. Of course, it can be improved, but how is still missing. So that, I would say, is the challenge. So thank you. Just a few brief comments from me.
Thank you so much, Naki. Really appreciate those insightful remarks. I know you've seen this field develop over decades now, so appreciate your remarks. I'd like to now open it up to the audience. I can see already a couple hands raised, and we definitely have time for this. I see my colleague Barty is searching for a microphone. So if you remember, we have the online audience, so we want to make sure they're able to hear us. I understand in the meantime the online audience is not able to put their comments in the YouTube chat, so we're we'll just take some questions here in person. First, Alina Mosner from SDSN. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the very nice session. I just have one comment about the trends that you presented, K1. So I think they were very optimistic, showing indeed what's going on in one part of the population, but this looks like these transitions take really much place among the wealthy, highly educated young people. And I'm a bit afraid that these trends will reach very soon a maximum, let's say, because it's a niche and it's a class thing. So how, in your scenarios, you're going to make assumptions about how these trends will propagate to other social classes in the north and to the south, where the situation is very different and aspirations are very different? Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the question. Why don't we take a second question in the meantime while some of the panelists collect their thoughts? Please go ahead and maybe say your name and affiliation if you could.
Hi, my name is Colin Nalden. I work for the Centre for Research into Energy Demand Solutions at the University of Oxford. And I'm focusing on policy asymmetries between the demand and the supply side. And I think this year is a very good example of this asymmetry. We're at an event, we're talking about climate change, and the IPCC suggests that the demand side could deliver 40 to 70% of the carbon emission reductions, yet there's only a handful of people here. What can we do to bring this to the fore? And why is the emphasis on supply, where we could make all these gains and deliver multiple benefits by focusing more on the demand side? Thank you.
Two very good questions. Thanks so much. Yeah, as I was sitting here myself, I was thinking I wanted to ask the panelists, how much do we know about the what countries are pledging in their NDCs and their long-term strategies, and how much of that is demand-side focus versus supply-side focus, and is it enough? And as Colin just said, what more can we do? But maybe we take, well, either of these questions. I think the one on scenarios first. I don't know, Kayvon, if you had any thoughts. I saw you jotting down some notes, so I'll let you go ahead with that. Make sure to push the button.
Okay, thank you, Eileen, for this question. I think it's a really crucial question whether we would see this type of trends also in other constellations. So my diagnosis is that it is not necessarily only a rich country trend. It happens everywhere where the alternatives work. Yeah. So also in rich countries, young people don't have driver's license in cities, because in cities they have an alternative mobility system that is actually better than the car. You would be crazy in Vienna, for example, where I'm coming from, to have a car, to commute within the city. The public transportation infrastructure is better. So I would say whether this will diffuse also into the developing world is a matter of providing the necessary infrastructure where the competing mode is then as good or even better than the transportation with car. I think the developing world, because of the income differences also, this type of shared mobility is more attractive, because you don't need the capital to buy your own car to appreciate a good service if somebody invests into the infrastructure that is available. And this is, I think, very much connected to what's happening at this COP. In this COP, we are talking about fair and just finance. So where should the finance come from in some of the developing world where we know that we need massive investments into the infrastructure? So I think it's a little bit also in our hands whether the transition will happen in the developing world as well. So it's about fair finance of infrastructure into the alternative so that you can have this type of demand side changes. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kayvon. Would any other panelists like to weigh in on this question? I see Joashri shaking her head. Go ahead.
I don't think this is a conversation only in the developed country, because what K1 said is that shared mobility will be an important means of transportation for the developing countries. I just want to tell you that in my city, in Calcutta, it is 92% people move by the public transport. And in whole of India, only 10% have four-wheelers as their ownership. So it's already, if you see, it's a shared mobility-based civilization. And so in that, what is happening? So what is happening is that middle class was moving away from the public transit system to the private car system because of the status consumption, right? So basically the narrative was such that you need a status consumption symbols. So over time, what has happened over past 10 years in Calcutta city, we have this case study in the IPCC report where we are showing is that there is a investment in making the public transit system more comfortable, more secure with digital technology, and more comfortable with thermal comfort. And so middle class is actually shifting from their car-based mobility to public transit system again because it was culturally there. It was very easy to make this cultural shift. So this is already happening. So people do not take their car to the work because they have a better public transit system now. So what I'm saying is that we are not yet stuck on the, we are not yet locked in on an unsustainable development path. We have enough scope to just improve those to make it a sustainable practice. So maybe when you hear it more in the developed country because it is a big transformation that is needed. But in developing countries, there is huge scope now when we are going to go more urbanized. And so there we can have the infrastructure choice, we have the culture already, how to make it more better. So 42% are the cyclists in India, right? So you need the cycling path to be developed better in the cities so that you can provide that. So I'm just saying that in developing countries, it's already there. You need to improve it further with modern technological intervention, and you can build a better infrastructure for the new cities. So there is enough scope for that. And the second question, it just got out of my mind, why it is not happening. When I talk to, say, for example, in the countries, so we find that the ministries who take the decision, I'm giving you the a real narrative, right? So it's the supply side investors, they are visiting them every day. And so they just know that they're coming with their money to invest in more and more and more of power sector development. But no one is coming to say that, okay, I can do, but then I'm saying that this is happening now. So they are coming that, okay, I can set up a smart meter system. So they are coming up with a better appliance system. But this I see in India. But when I go to Bangladesh, I see that they do not have any policy or building code which includes the energy efficiency in that. So that does not exist, but in India it exists. You go to Pakistan, no one talks about that because there is no capacity there to include this in their policies. So these are the ones where we really need to be working on, which Nan was saying, that the capacity, the knowledge, the technology access, the financing, the investment. So we need to go into this direction to make it happen better so that these countries do not get locked in on a wrong pathways.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joshri. I don't know if Nan or if others wanted to comment in particular on the question from our colleague from Oxford about this asymmetry between supply and demand side measures in research and policy, the public discourse, and how can we correct that? Nan, I remember you saying that there were simply, you did this review, there's simply not enough policies in place to push these demand side innovations. Maybe you can say more.
Sure. I think Joyce already commented. This is a very important point. I think this last century of development is really based on this notion we got to grow and grow, right? To meet the growth, we need more production and supply. And then to talk about even lowering demand doesn't resonate very well, even for governments or for businesses. So I think that may be the really fundamental barrier in our thinking. Besides that, there are other barriers and exist for deployment of these demand-side measures. Some are informational. We simply don't know how much we consume, how we compare with others. And some are more, and because split incentives, give you example, buildings. Designers don't build the building, the builders don't and own the building. They don't own the building. Owner may not even live in the building, right? So the split incentive, if I put efficient windows, who's gonna benefit from that? And so, and then the people who are living in those buildings, they don't have the control. They can't change the design. They change the way of construction, and all of those. And then also, Joyce also pointed out, the investment community. It's very hard for them to know and understand the saving potential from these demand measures, and how much energy can we save from an efficient window I put in or insulation. It's very hard to understand from these non-technical and the staff, and therefore hard to invest in and hard to get the financing and then all of those. So there are many measures preventing these and technologies or measures being deployed. Yeah, just want to stop there.
Okay, great. I think we are very soon reaching the end of our session, but so I'm not sure if we have time for more questions, but if there would be any burning remarks that any of our panelists would like to make before we finish, any other reflections. I think we still have half a minute or so. If it's a quick question, yeah, Deanna, then I think we can go with it. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah, go ahead.
Just very quickly, because it was actually, the gentleman stole my thunder. I was going to add the same, but just building on that, could you imagine that at the next COP, just like there is a methane agreement, there is a deforestation agreement, couldn't we try to champion a demand agreement? Because it is a problem that when there is a CCS or whatever, other sessions, it's full and people don't fit in, but there is no negotiators here. But I think you answered excellently why. But do you think that would work, or would that help?
Yeah, I'm not sure who wants to. We maybe have one reflection we have to finish up here.
This is a great idea, and we really need to see how to create that narrative. And in next COP, let's see how we make it a big, big splash.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think a big splash was made in the IPCC context with the chapter exclusively on demand. I think that can help slowly but surely change some of that narrative and give policymakers some substance and fodder to work with. So that's great. Well, yeah, we've reached the end of our session. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for joining. Thanks to our panelists, especially for presenting and your insightful remarks. Let's thank the panelists once again. And thanks to everyone for viewing online. That's it? Yeah.